This is my June reading wrap up. I read 7 books in the month of June, and most of them were really great. 2 of them are rereads. One of them is going to be a favorite for the year. I already can tell. Yeah, I really enjoyed them, and there's a lot to say, so let's just get into it. Woodworking by Emily St. James is the story of a teacher in South Dakota who is coming into her trans identity, coming into her transness, and sort of looking for kinship, for resources, for anything. And the only person she can turn to is a trans, like an out trans student. So it makes for a very interesting situation. It gets really messy. It talks about relationships and family, and it explores all sorts of dynamics in a really interesting way. I think that the way that it talks about transness is really beautiful and really, really gorgeous. I don't want to give away too much, so I will stop there. No spoilers, but yeah, I loved this book. This is the kind of book that a lot of people are always asking me for a happy recommendation, like a positive book that is a queer experience. And this is one of those where there is some sadness to it, but it's all queer joy. Like that is the through line. And that, like, yeah, I just loved reading this. I loved being in this world. I loved these characters. I felt really attached to them. And I'm really excited to read more from Emily St. James. This was an incredible book. I'm really happy that it exists. And yeah, I think everyone should read it. Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt is his first novel. He wrote a memoir called All Down Darkness Wide, which I haven't read yet because I was worried it would destroy me. And we shall see, because this did hurt a little bit while reading. This is about a 16-year-old boy who's like an out gay kid in a small village in the north of England, and it essentially recounts his experience over one summer as he develops feelings for like a straight classmate of his, or straight friend, classmate, someone his age. And it also tracks desire and his desire and queer desire in a way that I felt really compelled by. I felt a way that felt really like realistic and accurate to my experience, where it was like whatever sort of like piqued his interest, it kind of like went in that direction, if you know what I mean. It just like followed his intuition. And it's done so well, and the way that it explains it is really beautiful. And yeah, it does feel like a classic tale of like gay boy, like straight boy, but for some reason it's written in a way that made it like feel new and fresh and different and just really beautiful. It reminded me of Lie With Me by Philippe Besson. I was going to say the French title. Lie With Me by Philippe Besson. It made me feel that same way. And yeah, I really loved this too, and I'm excited to read his memoir, although I don't know, this was quite poignant, so I don't know if I am quite ready for another like stab in the heart. A Language of Limbs by Dylan Hardcastle is one of my favorite books this year. I'm calling it now, and I think it will stay that way. This is incredibly written. It does something that I think not a lot of books can do for me, which is it like stylistically takes a big swing and executes it perfectly, without it feeling like a gimmick or feeling like it's trying really hard. Essentially, it's about one choice, one night that changes the course of a life, and it splinters it into 2. So on one side, we follow the choice to suppress and push down queer desire, and on the other side, we have the choice to live authentically. And we follow both of those lives for 30 years into the future. It starts in the 1970s in Australia. So it goes through the AIDS crisis, the first Mardi Gras, so many things. It talks about so much from a time that I didn't know much about what was going on in Australia. This was really interesting, but also so beautifully done. And the way that the 2 lives parallel, but also like contrast each other was really interesting. And that's what made it so much more compelling. Like there was not a lot of telling, because it was sort of like the between was where a lot of the action was happening for me emotionally, at least. And I just loved it. It was so beautiful. I love everything that it has to say about relationships and people and community and parenthood, and desire and running away from who you are and that catching up to you. Just so great. I love this book. Open Throat by Henry Hoke is so special and so weird and I really, really love this book. This was a reread for me. It's about a gay mountain lion who's living in the hills of Los Angeles. Um, and so that already sounds really weird, but it also is like an examination of humanity from like an outsider's perspective. It reminded me of Beautyland by Marianne Bertino in that way, where like it's sort of like detached from humanity, but because it's written by a person who has that experience, like knows what to inject into it to make it really resonant and loud and like push the message across. Um, Doing it so well, so interesting. The way that it talks about like violence and destruction and like sex and bodies and desire and all of these things. It's so fascinating and so well done. And it's also written kind of in verse, um, which I forgot about, but was really compelled by this time around. Um, and yeah, I just love this thing. And you can read it in one sitting, which is what I did this time. I had a beautiful Sunday in the sun in a park, and I read this, and I am the better for it. I'm really excited to read more from Henry Hook. I know that this was adapted into a play in Fire Island, I think last year or the year before, which is so cool. I would love to see that if there's ever another production of it. But I'm really excited to read more from Henry Hook because this is just incredible. The Town of Babylon by Alejandro Varela is a reread for me, and this was one of my favorite books of the last couple of years, and it still is. I really, really loved it so much the second time around. This is about a gay Latinx man who goes back home to visit his parents because his parents are sick and he needs to take care of them to a certain extent. And that visit coincides with his high school's 20-year reunion. And so he gets sort of this clash of past and present for many reasons. One of them being like, everyone that he went to high school with, and his past experiences and things that happened and trauma and love and first loves, and all of those things are so like present in my thought process and when I write, and things that I think about a lot. Like the clash between past and present is so interesting to me in this way, where it like is really on the page in what's happening. Like he is face to face with his past in a way that's really interesting. But also this is so big brain energy and so smart in the way that it like dissects suburbia and the way that suburban towns were created, what they're composed of, who they are composed of, how those people came to be there, and like what brought them there, how they got there, what they did there, how it evolved. Like all of those things were so fascinating and so like beautifully put here. And yeah, I was so taken by this story. I love these characters. I love this writer, and he has a new book that's coming out in September, I believe, which I have an arc of. So I'm excited to read that one because once again, hit it out of the park. After the Blue Hour by John Rechy is my first John Rechy, and maybe that is my mistake, because I felt like there was something I didn't quite grasp here. It's not the story or the book or like what was going on, but the tone and the voice felt a little off to me, and I didn't feel compelled by them, and I didn't respond to them as much as I thought I would. So maybe I should have started with like his biggest book, which is City of Night, which was published in the 60s. This is a quite recent publication though. This is set in the 60s, and it's sort of autofiction-y because it's about a 24-year-old writer named John Rechy who is, I guess, prolific enough because he has this man who is a fan of his and really likes his work, invites him to live on an island with him, his wife, and his teenage son. Really weird premise. And so he goes to this island and like runs away from Los Angeles, and then he's confronted with these three people that reflect a version of him to himself. That's how it felt to me. Like it felt like the mirror that is being held up by these people is so interesting because it's different for each of them. And then it turns into like a bit of intrigue, a bit of suspense. Everything is sexually charged. But everyone is unlikable. And there was not a lot to hold on to in this story, which I guess was its downfall for me. But I'm like really interested to read more from John Rechy, and I don't know if this is maybe just a fluke or it's kind of like Dennis Cooper, where I have to have read the other ones to get what's going on here. So maybe that's the case, and maybe I'll give it a try. City of Night seems really interesting to me. This one is like had a weird premise, which is what drew me to it, but maybe it like was weird and then the execution didn't quite work for me. But yeah, that was after the Blue Hour. But I'm not writing off John Recchi, who's like an iconic queer writer who I want to get into and I want to see if I respond to his work. So TBD on that. Stay tuned. Memorial by Brian Washington. This is my first Brian Washington. I think I'm not sure why. This is just the one that I owned. And it was really, really great. It's about a gay couple and they're sort of at a crossroads. They're sort of on the brink of something. They're kind of in limbo. Um, and then one of them goes to Japan to take care of his father, but his mother is coming to stay with him and his partner. And so he leaves his partner and his mother alone. Um, and that essentially just like turns into like a really messy situation, but not messy in terms of what happens, but in terms of relationships and the way that it talks about family and people and relationships for the partner that has stayed and is with his partner's mother and the person that is visiting his like father who's sick. So fascinating the way that like it explores parenthood in so many different facets in so many different ways and in ways that felt really good to read about. Good to read about is maybe not the right way to say that, but you know what I mean. It was like it's some of it is sad and some of it is confronting, but in a way that feels good. And yeah, I think it's really interesting the way that it confronts family for the partner whose family isn't like physically present as like the crux of the story, but really interesting and really well done. Beautiful writing. This is the kind of writing that for some reason it reminds me of popcorn. Like you just can't stop eating it, and then you're left with an empty bowl, and there's like kernels all over your teeth, and they're stuck there. That's what this feels like. I couldn't put it down and I really loved it. And so I'm excited to read more from Brian Washington. There's Lot and Family Meal, and I think there's maybe more, but yeah, this was really good and I loved the writing. That was my month of June in terms of reading. I would love to know what you read and loved in the month of June, so please let me know in the comments. I would love to see it. I definitely have a bunch of standouts from this month. A Language of Limbs, I cannot say enough. I loved that book. The Town of Babylon, I've been talking about it for years. Incredible novel. Open Heaven was great. Open Throat is great. Just so many great books. Brian Washington, I'm excited to read more from him. Anyways, I loved my reading in June, and so I'm just excited to hear what you loved also so I can get some recommendations. But for now, that's it. And as always, thank you for watching.